Good afternoon, scholars. Let's go ahead and get started with another day of history with Mr. Amador. Today we're going to continue talking about the Civil War. We're going to be getting into some of the major battles that took place during the Civil War, some of the turning points of the war. So today we're going to be looking at two big battles, Antietam and the Battle of Gettysburg. We're also going to be learning about the Siege of Vicksburg. And a siege, again, as you went over in your vocab, is going to be when the military surrounds a city to kind of like force the enemy to surrender. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with Antietam, a bloody affair. The Battle of Bull Run ended Northerners' hopes for a quick victory. In the months that followed that sobering defeat, the Union began to carry out the Anaconda Plan. The Anaconda Plan in action. Step 1 of the Anaconda Plan was to blockade the South's ports and cut off its trades. In 1861, the Union Navy launched a blockade that, by the end of the year, closed off most southern ports to foreign ships. The South had long exported its cotton to Great Britain and France, so the Confederacy looked to Great Britain to send ships to break through the blockade. The British, however, refused this request, and as a result, the South could not export cotton to Europe or import needed supplies. All right, so this first step of the Anaconda Plan is to pretty much almost like lay a siege to the entire South. They're going to place a naval blockade and stopping the South from being able to trade with other countries. So now the South isn't making any money. They can't sell its cotton because normally it's the North who buys it or Europe. And now the North is not buying it and they're not letting Europe buy it from the South. So this is going to be a huge, huge weakness for the Confederacy, not being able to make money off selling cotton or being able to get supplies like food, clothes, and other military supplies. All right, let's continue. Early in 1862, the Union began to put Step 2 of the Anaconda Plan into action. The strategy, which is similar to those used in future wars, was to divide the Confederacy by gaining control of the Mississippi River. In April, Union Admiral Dave Farragut led 46 ships up the Mississippi River to New Orleans. This was the largest American fleet ever assembled, and in the face of such overwhelming force, the city surrendered without firing a shot. So the Union was able to capture the city of New Orleans when floating up the Mississippi River coming from the Gulf of Mexico. They're going to be able, because there's so many ships, they're able to, New Orleans surrenders without even a fight, which is kind of crazy, especially because New Orleans was such an important city as it's the last city at the end of the Mississippi River. Meanwhile, Union forces, headed by General Ulysses S. Grant, began moving south towards the Mississippi from Illinois. In 1862, Grant won a series of victories that put Kentucky and much of Tennessee under Union control. A general of remarkable determination, Grant refused to accept any battle outcome other than unconditional or total surrender. For this reason, U.S. Grant was known to his men as Unconditional Surrender Grant. Later in 1862, Union General George McClellan sent 100,000 men by ship to capture Richmond. Again, a Union victory seemed certain, but despite being outnumbered, Confederate forces stopped the Union attack in a series of well-fought battles once more. Richmond was safe. All right, so step 2. So step 1 is in effect, and the Union is working on step 2 of the Anaconda Plan, which is to capture the entire Mississippi River. They're going to get the southern part of it by capturing New Orleans, and Ulysses S. Grant is going to be capturing the northern part of it from Illinois all the way down to Kentucky. But we're going to be reading a little bit later, or you guys will be reading a little bit later today about capturing the middle part of the Mississippi River. Alright, now we're going to get into the Battle of Antietam. Alright, at this point, General Robert E. Lee, the commander of the Confederate forces, did the unexpected. He sent his troops across the Potomac River into Maryland, a slave state that remained in the Union. By invading Maryland, Lee hoped his show of strength might persuade the state to join the Confederacy. He also hoped that a Confederate victory on the Union soil would convince European nations to support the South. On a crisp September day in 1862, Confederate and Union armies met near the Maryland town of Sharpsburg along Antietam Creek. It's cut off. I can't see what it says. I'm going to do this. Sorry, y'all. I don't know why it's cut off. Well, a day, McClellan's troops pounded Lee's badly outnumbered forces, and the following day, Lee retreated to Virginia. McClellan claimed Antietam as a Union victory, but many who fought there viewed the battle as a defeat for both armies. Of the 75,000 Union troops who fought at Antietam, about 2,100 were killed, and about 10,300 were wounded or missing. And then of the 52,000 Confederates who fought, about 2,770 lost their lives, while 11,000 were wounded or missing. So that's a lot of people. And in that single day of fighting, more Americans were killed than in the War of 1812 and the Mexican-American War combined. The Battle of Antietam was the bloodiest day of the war. So that's a lot of people. One battle had more people killed than two separate wars combined. That is a lot of people. So the Battle of Antietam is important for a few reasons. One, it's the first battle that took place on northern soil. Most of the battles have been all of the battles have been in the South. This was the first one that took place in the North, and the reason why was that Robert E. Lee hoped by winning a battle there that Maryland would join the Confederacy, as well as European nations would support them and come fight for them, just like the French did with America during the Revolution. Another thing that's crazy is that more men died in this battle than the War of 1812 and Mexican-American War combined. And while the South did retreat back to Virginia, the Union lost many men to call this a victory. So the Battle of Antietam, while technically the Union did not retreat, the Confederacy did. The Union lost a lot of men and didn't really gain any advantage. So kind of a draw here, which is crazy how many people died. All right, so again, important because it's the first Confederate invasion of the North. It's also important because this is the bloodiest single day in American history. So no day in American history did more Americans die than the Battle of Antietam, September 12th. All right, let's keep going. All right, the new realities of war. One thing to talk about too real quick is the Civil War is going to be the first American war that we have like pictures of. So we're going to be seeing a lot of pictures. This is taken after the Battle of Antietam. So as you can see, not a pretty sight. And then this is at a Civil War hospital. So again, fascinating that this is one of the first wars to be photographized. All right, let's keep going. The new realities of war. The horrifying death toll at Antietam reflected the new realities of warfare. In past wars, battles have been fought in hand-to-hand combat using bayonets, but improved weapons made killing from a distance much easier during the Civil War. Rifles, which replaced muskets, were accurate over long distances, and improved cannons and artillery also made it easier for armies to attack forces some distance away. As a result, armies could meet, fight, die, and part without either side winning a clear victory, as we saw with the Battle of Antietam. medical care was not as advanced as weaponry. The Civil War doctors had no understanding of the causes of infections, and surgeons operated in dirty hospital tents with basic instruments. Few bothered to wash their hands between patients, so infections spread rapidly between patients. Pretty disgusting. The hospital death rate was so high that soldiers often refused medical care. An injured Ohio soldier wrote that he chose to return to the battle rather than receive treatment from a doctor, thinking that I had a better die by rebel bullets than Union quackery, which means unskilled medical care. So what this is saying is that the medical care was so bad because doctors had no idea about infections and bacteria, so they didn't wash their hands or the tools that they're using for like these amputations. So there's a lot of mixing of different bloods. And so a lot of soldiers would be like, I'd rather be on the battlefield than going to the hospital. Like, you were more likely to die in the hospital than on the battlefield. This is crazy. Let's keep going. Or like if you were to get medical attention, that's what they were saying. All right, so as staggering as battle death tolls were, far more soldiers died of disease than wounds. So unsanitary conditions in army camps were so bad that about 3 men died of typhoid, pneumonia, and other diseases for everyone who died in battle. As one soldier observed, these big battles are not as bad as the fever. That's crazy. So for every one soldier that died on the battlefield, 3 died at camp from disease. So again, the battlefield is a safe place to be at, which is crazy to think about. So disease is going to be the big killer. So new realities of war, new weapons, new weapon technology, combined with using traditional war tactics, equals lots of deaths, right? So people are lining up and fighting just like they did during the Revolutionary War, except for now they have rifles and advanced artillery and cannon, so they're able to kill from a further distance. So a lot of people are going to die in this war. The Civil War was also the first war to take place after the Industrial Revolution, so that's why we have all of these crazy technology and advanced weapons, is because of the Industrial Revolution with factories making things instead of people. You're going to have a huge advancement in making killing machines. So unfortunately, medicine was not up to date with the times, so many people died because of not knowing about simple things like washing their hands, infections and bacteria. So these doctors did not wash their tools. So this led to many people dying. Many refused medical help, as the death rate in hospitals was worse than the battlefield. So again, crazy fact about the Civil War. And again, one thing to remember is super important, is that the major cause of death during the war was not battle wounds, but disease. So you were safer on the battlefield than you were at camp. All right, so now we're going to get into the major turning point of the war. Honestly, the South was looking like it could possibly win the Civil War, but after Gettysburg, it's pretty downhill for the South, and the North just keeps winning and winning until the war is over. So let's go ahead. We're going to read about Gettysburg, a turning point. While neither side won the Battle of Antietam, it was enough of a victory for Lincoln to take his first steps towards ending slavery. When the Civil War began, Lincoln had resisted pleas from abolitionists to make emancipation, or the freeing of slaves, a reason for fighting the Confederacy. He himself opposed slavery, but the purpose of the war, he said, is to save the Union, and is not either to save or destroy slavery. So Abraham Lincoln, whether clever politician or not, made sure to tell people and keep it in the public that the Civil War was about keeping the United States from breaking apart. So nothing So not about slavery, but keeping the United States intact. But we're going to see how that's going to change. The Emancipation Proclamation. As the war dragged on, Lincoln changed his mind and decided to make abolition a goal of the Union. Lincoln realized that European nations that opposed slavery would never support the side that wanted slavery to continue. Freeing slaves could also deprive the Confederacy of a large part of its workforce. On January 1st, 1863, President Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. The proclamation, or formal order, declared slaves in all Confederate states to be free. This announcement had little immediate effect on slavery. The Confederate states ignored the document, and slaves living in the states loyal to the Union were not affected by the proclamation. Still, for many in the North, the Emancipation Proclamation changed the war into a crusade for freedom. The Declaration of Independence had said that all men are created equal, and now the fight was about living up to those words. So, Emancipation Proclamation is more of like a symbol more than it was something that was actually action. So, Lincoln just says with the Emancipation Proclamation that all slaves living in rebelling states are free. Of course, the South is going to ignore this and be like, well, you have no power or say over our country, while as the states that stay loyal to the Union that have slavery, Delaware, Maryland, Kentucky, they're gonna be able to keep their slaves. So the only reason that makes Emancipation Proclamation significant is that now it signals that this war is more than just keeping the United States together. Now that one of the goals for the Union victory is ending slavery. All right, let's get into the Battle of Gettysburg. In the summer of 1863, Lee felt confident enough to risk another invasion of the North. He hoped to capture a northern city and help convince the weary North to seek peace. Union and Confederate troops met on July 1st, 1863, west of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. The Union troops, about 90,000 strong, were led by newly appointed General George C. Meade. After a brief skirmish, they occupied 4 miles of high ground along an area known as Cemetery Ridge. About a mile to the west, some 75,000 Confederate troops gathered behind Cemetery Ridge. The following day, the Confederates attempted to find weak spots in the Union position, but the Union lines held firm. On the third day, Lee ordered an all-out attack on the center of the Union line. Cannons filled the air with smoke and thunder. George Pickett led 15,000 Confederate soldiers in a charge across the low ground separating the two forces, almost like a death wish, or almost like a suicide mission. This Pickett's charge. Let's keep going. Pickett's charge may have been the closest the Confederacy came to winning the war. However, as Confederate troops pressed forward, Union gunners opened great holes in their advancing lines. Those men who managed to make their way to Cemetery Ridge were struck down by Union soldiers in hand-to-hand combat. Although Gettysburg was a victory for the Union, the losses on both sides were staggering. This was a 3-day battle. More than 17,500 Union soldiers and 23,000 Confederate troops were killed or wounded in the 3 days of battle. Lee, who lost about 1/3 of his army, 33% of his army in this battle was killed, withdrew to Virginia. From this point on, he would only wage a defensive war on Southern soil. So this is going to be the last time that General Lee and the Confederacy are going to invade the North. So both times was a failure. Again, a lot of people died in this battle. More people died in the Battle of Gettysburg than any other American battle. It was a 3-day battle, so it's why it's not the bloodiest day That's Antietam. But again, we're seeing these high numbers because of this whole fighting a traditional warfare using modern technology and advanced weaponry. All right, so while neither side won the Battle of Antietam, it was enough of a victory for Lincoln to take his first steps toward ending slavery. So on January 1st, President Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. This proclamation, or formal order, declared slaves in all Confederate states to be free. In the summer of 1863, Lee felt confident enough to risk another invasion of the North. He hoped to capture a northern city and help convince the weary North to seek peace. They're going to meet at Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, for the Battle of Gettysburg, which is going to be a 3-day battle. And one thing that was important was that this Pickett's Charge was the closest the Confederacy came to winning that war, because if Pickett's Charge was successful and if the Confederacy won the Battle of Gettysburg, who knows, the South could have won the war, and American history as we know it could be different. Would have been different. All right, so important to talk about. So while significant, the Emancipation Proclamation did not free a single slave, as it was only directed towards the Confederacy, and they ignored it. And although Gettysburg was a victory for the Union, the loss on both sides were staggering. A lot of people died in these 3 days of battle, and so this is the bloodiest battle in American history. And it ended on the 4th of July, too, which is crazy. All right. Let's go ahead and we're going to get started with our Cycle 1 independent practice. Y'all are going to head to Google Classroom, and where you worked on your Do Now, you're going to go to the next section for Cycle 1. You will have 10 minutes. When you're done, you can go ahead and let your advisors know by putting down the chat or putting your Chromebooks at half mast. I'm going to go ahead and end the video here, and I'll see y'all back here on Wednesday.